All right, I'm here with Mr. B.R. Hughes, Bill Hughes, one of the original founders of the American Bladesmith Society. I'm Braden Herring. My grandfather was Don Hastings, another one of the members of the American Bladesmith Society. Mr. Hughes was telling me some stories about my grandfather earlier, good stories. Don Hastings passed away in 1986 before I was born. So, Mr. Hughes, take it away.
Well, your grandfather was one of the finest gentlemen I have ever met in my life. He was a true gentleman in every sense of the word. I was privileged to work with him in the founding of the American Bladesmith Society. There were four of us. The leader was Bill Moran, who was a noted bladesmith in Maryland, who was the first American bladesmith to successfully produce Damascus. Don Hastings was I believe he was a minister, a Baptist minister in Palestine, Texas, and he was the second successful maker of Damascus steel, followed by Bill Bagwell, who lived in North Louisiana, a small town, and he was the third American bladesmith to successfully produce Damascus. And I was a writer as well as being a college administrator, but I wrote for several gun magazines, and there were no knife magazines at the time. There were only gun magazines, and I would write knife articles about the men who made knives, not so much as the knives they made, but the men themselves. So I was writing for magazines like Guns Magazine, Gun World, Gun Sport, like this, because, as I say, there were no knife magazines.
Sure.
And some of the editors saw the future, and I've got to give credit to Jack Lewis of Gun World, because he and I were the co-writers of the first edition of the Gun Digest Book of Knives, which was a best-selling book, 1973, believe it or not.
Really?
And that's about the era when I was really getting to know your grandfather, and we were working on trying to get the idea of the American Bladesmith Society, trying to put it into action. Bill Moran stands right at the top from every standpoint, but I must say that Don Hastings was one of the finest gentlemen I have ever met, and a very talented bladesmith. You look at his knives today in light of what they're doing today, and there's no comparison. But he was a very skilled knife maker, and he didn't make that many knives, but I can't say enough good things about him. He was a good teacher, a great man, and a skilled bladesmith. He was a pretty dedicated knife maker. I mean, he was serious about making knives.
Yeah.
He would sometimes come to Old Washington, Arkansas, which is the home of James Black, a noted frontier knife maker. And he would frequently come to Old Washington and put on demonstrations of hammering. And I distinctly remember him coming to Old Washington and demonstrating bladesmithing. And he was a good teacher.
So did he travel all over to teach the craft? And
he traveled, yes, he traveled quite a bit to teach it.
Yeah.
And at his own expense, I might add. Back in those days, people weren't paying out very good money to bladesmiths. And in 1976, we signed papers for the American Bladesmith Society. Shreveport, Louisiana, the coffee shop there. We met. Bill flew down from Shreveport. I drove down from Texarkana. Bagwell drove from Vivian, which is just a little wide spot in the road near Shreveport, about 40 miles.
Okay.
And then Don had to drive from Palestine, which is about, I think, 85 miles. So we met there at the airport because Bill had to fly in.
Okay.
And we met in the coffee shop. And we sat there in the coffee shop drinking coffee and writing the bylaws. And after we had written them on a lined rules pad, after we all signed it right there, December the 4th, 1976.
And your hopes for the ABS at that time was, well, you said something about no more than
Bill
20.
Moran said if we play our cards right, we can have 25 members.
How many members do you think there are today in the
About
ABS?
3,000, is that right? Roughly 3,000. So we've done pretty well.
I'd say so. I'd say so.
And in 1984, Don was, and the other three founders were the teachers at the first Texarkana College Hammer-In, which was held at Old Washington, Arkansas in the blacksmith shop. We were the four teachers, and we had 19 students that went and thought we had every student in the world. We thought we were really doing great.
Did you ever forge any knives yourself?
I'm sorry?
Did you ever forge any knives yourself?
I made 3 knives.
Mm-hmm.
The last one is at the bottom of Millwood Lake near Ashdown, Arkansas. It was so bad I didn't want anybody else to see it, and that ended my knife-making career.
So needless to say, you didn't stick with it long, huh?
I was not talented at all, but I was smart enough to realize that you may be a pretty good writer, but you're a complete flop when it comes to making knives.
Oh, well, hopefully, the more I learn about it and the more interested I become in it, hopefully, I may take up a couple of hammer-ins and maybe try to learn the craft. I
think it would be a good experience for you because you would be re-experiencing what your grandfather did.
Yeah.
I've got to tell you a story. I have a dear friend. He's died recently in St. Louis,
Mm-hmm.
businessman, knife collector, member of the ABS board,
Mm-hmm.
and a very dear friend. And they were putting up a knife collection at the Arkansas Museum in Little Rock.
Okay.
And they told him they would like to have knives made by the ABS founders. Well, I'm not a knife maker.
Uh-oh.
Okay, now keep that in mind. Now, he says, I'd like to have one of your knives, BR. I said, I don't want anybody to see my knife. He said, I tell you what, you give me one of your knives, and nobody but me will ever see it. So the next time Carolyn and I go to Little Rock, there's my knife at the museum
Mm-hmm.
as one of the founders of the ABS. And so that's anyway, he used to be a good friend of mine.
Hey, yeah, he that sounded like a little bit of a bait and switch deal there. Well, I'm glad I was able to pick up some more of his work and add to my collection, and possibly give some of those to my kiddos as heirlooms one day, and kind of keep that going. But I'm glad that I was able to finally get in touch with someone like Brian Tomberlin that could put me in touch with you and the Hammer-Ins, right. Because up until that point I was completely oblivious about all this. So, but thank y'all for having me today, and thank you for.
It's been a pleasure, and we appreciate you coming. I hope it's been beneficial.
It has been. It has been. I'm a huge Texas history buff, and I think it's sad that society today, some in society don't care nothing about history or things that are important to us. So do you have any other stories that you could think of that stuck out in your mind about Don, or any kind of interactions y'all had?
Not really. We had I hope he was as pleased with his dealings with me as I was with my dealings with him. And he was a fine gentleman, and I'm privileged to have known him and had him as a friend. One
thing that was that interested Don in the first place to start hammer forging knives was he saw the Iron Mistress.
Yes.
And I think you wrote that in your article, so that's how I learned that. Yeah. But in high school, he saw the Iron Mistress and sparked interest in hammer forging knives. So, which I got this year for Christmas. I got the Iron Mistress, and we watched it. So I'd never seen it, so that was kind of a good story. Anyways, well, I will wrap this interview up, but I appreciate you sitting down with us, and it was very, very nice meeting you. Yes, sir, absolutely.